The way that most people get better at advertising is by learning on the job. They learn from the people around them who have more experience, picking up little nuggets of knowledge on a day-to-day basis as they go through their job. But you can supercharge this development. You can steal knowledge from people who have much more than you simply by reading the books that they write. The problem is there's an absolute mountain of books out there. Some of them are brilliant and some of them are really boring and just not that useful. It can be really hard to know which ones to invest their time and effort into reading. So this is the first episode in a new series called Book Cheats. Each time I release a video, I'm going to look at a different book that's worth reading. I'm going to summarise it for you, and I'm going to talk about some of the key points that you could take from it, so that you can kind of pretend that you might have read a bit of it before you actually have. But this isn't going to be a substitute for reading it yourself. Welcome to Media Imposter. My name's Jack, and I'm here to help you make sense of advertising, creativity, and careers. And this is the first in a new series called Book Cheats. And today I'm going to be talking about Derek Thompson's Hitmakers, an unbelievably good book that has really helped me understand how people think and why certain things become popular. Before we get going, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you get informed next time I've got a new video out. This book is so good that I actually started talking about it to my friends who don't even work in media and advertising. Although they started taking the piss out of me and saying it's far too late to be trying to find out how to become popular. This isn't about how to become popular as a person, it's about understanding how certain conditions lead to things becoming popular. It uses a lot of really random examples, all the way through from classical composer Brahms to E.L. James's mummy porno hit 50 Shades of Grey. The first part of the book focuses on how things like frequency and exposure can contribute to something becoming popular. It looks at what our minds are actually capable of allowing to become popular, all the way through to our intrinsic proclivity for devouring stories and latching on to the latest fashion trends. The second part of the book looks towards the market. And if you're from the UK, bear in mind it is a little bit USA centric, but we can forgive it that because this book is just so damn good. It takes on the myth of the viral hit and why that's perhaps not the best way of describing something that becomes really widespread and popular from seemingly nothing. It also looks in detail at dating apps like Tinder and Bumble and how they've taken over the world. This is all underpinned by using economics to explain how something becomes popular. And to be honest with you, this book actually isn't really about advertising, but it is. See, when we're advertising our clients, we're basically entering a giant popularity contest between whatever your client is selling and literally anything else they could spend money on. It's really important as part of that we understand why some things are popular and why some things aren't. Now, you could go away and read loads of different psychological journals and scientific texts, which if you can, good luck to you. But if you're working in advertising, then chances are you're not entirely predisposed to do that sort of thing. Fortunately, this book isn't that long. You can get through it and get a lot of the top line stuff that you need in order to make sure that you understand it. So I've summarised the book, but what isn't this book and what are its drawbacks? I think first and foremost, this book was published in 2016. I think it was let me check. No, it was published in 2017. Now, whilst that might not actually seem all that long ago, lots of things changed in that time, and whilst a lot of the fundamentals are still relevant within this, it talks about Facebook, but at this point, TikTok hadn't really become such a big thing. I think the other thing to bear in mind is it's not a technical textbook. This isn't going to be something that's going to tell you about the technical aspects of advertising. It's not going to tell you how to create brilliant creative. It's not going to tell you how to plan a TV campaign. So what will this book actually do for you then? I think the first point is that once you finish reading it, you're going to feel smarter, which is kind of a prerequisite whenever you choose a book to read, right? Because you want to get through it and have fully understood it and to be able to then take those ideas and use them elsewhere. If you read a book that's too kind of opaque and it's florid language and it's all very then ultimately, is it really serving its purpose? It will make you want to read it again and you'll find yourself flicking back to certain chapters. And I think fundamentally, you're going to have a better idea of how the human race thinks than you ever did before. So as promised, I'm going to go through 3 key ideas from this book, which, Jesus Christ, 3 is really difficult because ultimately, this book is absolutely packed with brilliant ideas. But I'm going to pick out a few and then you can kind of get a flavour for what's going on. And as this series goes on, perhaps I'll refine this a little bit, but I think that the examples that I've picked out will be really useful. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about within this is repeated exposure, fluency, and disfluency. And I've opened this up as if I'm going to start reading to you from it. I'm not going to do that. So if you work in an agency, you will have heard lots of different people banging on about reach and frequency, and chances are you know what this means. How many people from your target audience does the campaign reach, and how many times does it do that on average? And one thing that you may or may not know is that different levels of frequency will elicit different cognitive effects on things that people are exposed to. Now, I knew this, but before reading this book, I didn't really understand why. So back in the 1960s, a psychologist named Robert Zazonch, I don't know, I can't pronounce his name that well. He was a very smart guy. He ran a series of experiments that proved how frequency affects the brain. He showed people a series of nonsense words, shapes, and Chinese-style characters, and he showed some more than others. At the end, people had to go down a list of the things that they'd seen and say which ones they preferred. And the resounding outcome was that the shapes and nonsense words and Chinese-style characters that they'd seen more, they preferred, because they felt familiarity. Now, this concept is called fluency. This is actually the same effect at play as when we look in the mirror and we see our face versus when we see our face when it's on YouTube in a video that we've made, in my case, or when you see it in a photograph. Now, often people will prefer the way their face looks in the mirror, and that's because we're used to seeing it that way, but often mirrors distort slightly how we look. So our minds are used to seeing that version of ourselves, and when we see it slightly differently, it's jarring. And this is what we call disfluency. Thompson goes into much greater depth about this, even going into talk about ABBA and why certain songs are more catchy than others, and what role repetition and frequency plays within this. Now, because we've experienced it before, the brain has to work less hard to fully understand it, and that's what we call fluency. It's that feeling of calm that you get when you've seen something that you've seen before. Disfluency is what we experience when the brain has to work too hard to fully understand something. It's like when you're sat around the dinner table at a family gathering and someone starts expressing one of those opinions. It's the reason why when you're hungover you end up watching Finding Nemo or The Jungle Book or The Simpsons. You've seen it before and you know what's coming, so it gives you that feeling of fluency and calm. Now, the best advertising makes use of fluency and disfluency and the tension that exists between the two. And that brings us on to the second point from this book. Now, this rule was created by a French designer named Raymond Loewy. He moved to America from France in the early 20th century, and he's responsible for that classic American design style that we've seen throughout the 1950s and 60s. The guy even did the paint job on Air Force One. Now, Maya stands for most advanced yet acceptable. And Maya speaks to the tension between fluency and disfluency. It's what people feel comfortable with, but also what they're willing to make the jump to. Now, Loewy said the following: the consumer is influenced in their choice of styling by two opposing factors. When resistance to the unfamiliar reaches its shock threshold and resistance to buying sets in, that is when something has reached its Maya threshold. So what the hell does that mean? So basically it means that people don't just like to be spoon-fed, and this is why having a really high frequency campaign just gets to the point of annoyance where people fully understand something. You need to get that balance right. You need to make sure that there is that tension between fluency and disfluency, because people like to feel smart. They like to work something out. We have a puzzle-solving brain. And this is why when we have good advertising, it makes people work. It doesn't just spoon-feed exactly what's going on to the target audience. This is why brave agencies and brave clients who propose and then sign off on brave work will get brilliant results more often. Because if you're too afraid to do something different to the rest of the market or what you've done for the past 5 years, then how could you possibly expect to see any results change? And this is why we see challenger brands like Oatly and Snug coming into the market and stealing share from the big established brands. So the third and final thing that I'm going to talk about from this book is the whole chapter called The Viral Myth. The thing is, I'm not actually going to be able to do this justice, but I'm going to give it a really good go. But in short, basically what Thompson does is he takes this idea around, I want something to go viral, and he picks it apart. Now, you'll see this in so many briefs. If you work in social media, then you'll have almost certainly seen things in briefs saying, oh yeah, we really want a viral idea. Just don't. Every client wants a viral idea, but ultimately I want to play for Millwall as a pro footballer, but most things are down to circumstance and chance. Thompson uses Twitter as an example. Now, it's really rare that something goes viral simply by someone posting it and then lots of small accounts with small followings retweeting it and it growing organically like that. What actually happens is when something goes truly viral, it will usually find its way to an account that's, maybe like Justin Bieber or Kim Kardashian as a lazy example, who have millions and millions of followings, and they'll retweet it to all their followers. So they almost act as a broadcaster for that information. And then usually what happens is smaller accounts will then retweet it off the back of those larger accounts. And usually if a celebrity retweets something, then other celebrities will see it and they might do the same. And then you've got a significant chain. And it's not just within Twitter. It also uses the example of 50 Shades of Grey. E.L. James basically built this groundswell of fandom on a fanfiction site. And then by the time it actually came out, she already had hundreds of thousands of readers ready to read her work. And then it was from there that she, rather than kind of going viral from that point, because lots of authors get read by hundreds of thousands of people, because of the nature of her book hitting that Maya rule, where it was something that people were familiar with, but it took into account sensibilities from the Twilight series, and it hit upon those points of familiarity that people then experience fluency with, which in the context of this book sounds a bit gross. But it was then picked up by news networks, by papers, all of these broadcast media channels that then sent it far and wide. And that then fueled the word of mouth. It wasn't really the other way round. So I really hope that I've not butchered these ideas too badly for you guys, and it's made you want to go away and read the books. It's made you want to go away. So I really hope that I've not butchered the ideas in this book too badly for you, but the only way to really find out is to go and read it for yourself, because this guy is absolutely brilliant. You'll get smarter by reading it, you'll understand people better, you'll bring ideas into your work at an advertising agency that lots of people might not. Thanks for watching, guys. We've got this.